Last season, Indiana went 45-28, putting them at the 4th seed in the Eastern Conference. They were eliminated in the first round by the Miami Heat. Their top performers were Domantas Sabonis, Malcolm Brogdon, and TJ Warren, and their more interesting players are Myles Turner and Victor Oladipo. Domantas Sabonis was one of the league's best inside scoring bigs last year. 51.1% of his field goal attempts came from 0 to 3 feet. In the post, he got the 17th most post-up possessions in the entire league, and from the post, he shot 53.2% from the field. So Domantas Sabonis has a plethora of ways to score inside, whether it be in the post or off of a pick and roll. He was adept at scoring inside, which was the main reason why he was an all-star in the East last year. In terms of shooting, he attempted 1 3 per game, so it wasn't really a main staple of his game. Never has been, I don't think ever really will be, or maybe I'm mistaken because a lot of bigs are gravitating towards the 3-point shot. But he shot a lot of deep mid-rangers. 13.8% of his field goal attempts came from 16 feet to up until the 3-point line, which we know now isn't the most efficient shot, but he converted it at a 48.7% clip. In terms of playmaking, this is what makes Sabonis different from a lot of bigs in the league. He's a top 5 playmaking big. Similar to his dad, I forgot his first name, it starts with an A though. Sabonis. He was a great playmaker out of the post, and you see a lot of that from Domantas. The only thing about it though is he has to cut down on his turnovers. He had a sub 2 assist to turnover ratio, so hopefully that can improve for him next regular season or this regular season. On defense, Sabonis has never been a good defender on the perimeter or low post. He's not a great rim protector, only a half a block per game, but you could hide him better defensively at the center position because he's solid enough in the low post. But with him playing at the 4, he's kind of exposed there because the NBA is getting a lot more perimeter oriented, and Sabonis just doesn't have the quickness to keep up with perimeter oriented 4s. The idea was that Myles Turner and Sabonis would complement each other a little bit. Sabonis would be the low post scorer while Myles would stretch the floor for him, and Myles would be the good to great interior defender while Sabonis isn't. But with the league getting more perimeter oriented, like I said, 2 bigs in your starting lineup just isn't effective unless the power forward can defend on the perimeter. And that's just not the case with Sabonis. Malcolm Brogdon had a pretty solid first year with the Indiana Pacers. He's always been a great playmaker. Just in Milwaukee, he didn't have the highest usage or the most opportunities to create plays because he was sharing a backcourt with Eric Bledsoe. But he was pretty unleashed with Indiana this year with the higher usage, and then Victor Oladipo not being there for most of the year. He's always had great assist to turnover ratios throughout his career. Last season, his assist to turnover ratio was 2.96, almost 3. So that just speaks to Malcolm's high basketball IQ as well. In his time in Milwaukee, he was always an efficient scorer. In his last year in Milwaukee, he got 50, 40, 90, which is an incredible feat that not many people accomplish. Though it was with him as a 3rd or 4th scoring option, it's still pretty impressive. But him going to Indiana, his efficiency kind of tailed off as the main backcourt ball handler and scorer. On the defensive end, Brogdon's always been a pretty good on-ball defender, good at staying in front of the ball handler. He doesn't really gamble on steals though. We kind of forget this, but Brogdon's already 28 because he spent 4 years in college. So this is basically the Brogdon that we'll see for the next 5 years. Last year was TJ Warren's first year in Indiana as well. He's always been a great offensive talent. He was putting up 18, 19 points per game in Phoenix pretty efficiently, and he even added a bit of a 3-point shot in his last year there. He was always known as kind of a mid-range scorer and like a mid-range slasher, but believe it or not, they gave him away for cash considerations. He was one of the league's best mid-range scorers. He's always been a great mid-range scorer, and that continued last season. He was a great inside scorer, boasting an incredible percentage from 0 to 3 feet. He's a true 3-level scorer, and he really went crazy in the bubble. All of his counting numbers went up in the bubble besides the playoffs, and his efficiency stayed pretty much the same. So on offense, Warren's basically just a scorer. His playmaking is virtually 0, and on defense, he's just not good. He can't stay in front of small forwards. He could be a good enough defending power forward, but Sabonis is there. So Myles Turner has always had great defending potential, and he still is a great defender. He's a shot blocking machine, and he doesn't foul too much, only 3.3 fouls per 36, and he's solid enough on switches and in space. So Myles Turner is already one of the league's best defending centers, and he's still relatively young. But on offense, there was reason to believe that he regressed a little because of his dips in efficiency. But I mainly attribute that to more three-point shots being taken by him. In 2019, 25% of his field goal attempts were threes, while in 2020, 42.5% of his field goal attempts were threes. So I don't think it was regression, just a change in shot selection. And then his offensive fit next to Sabonis is kind of weird, because I don't think Turner is a good enough stretch center to really space the floor for Sabonis. He's a great shooter for a big, but he's just simply league average in general when you look at the rest of the league. And I think playing next to Sabonis was really a big reason for his jump in three-point attempts. Victor Oladipo returned late last season, so I'm not really going to put his regular season numbers up. I'll put his playoff numbers up because that was a bit more higher usage for him. Last year was a return from the injury he suffered 2 seasons ago. He only played 19 regular season games and 4 playoff games, so it's pretty reasonable to assume rust. And another factor to consider was he was getting used to the new personnel. Late into the season and into a playoff run, he had to play with players like Malcolm Brogdon and TJ Warren, who weren't there to play with him in seasons before. And though he did get traded to Indiana with Sabonis, this is a different Sabonis that he got traded to Indiana with. This is all-star Sabonis, so he had some different personnel to get used to. Defensively, he should still be there, I'm not too worried, but on offense I do worry a bit, just if he can have the same burst as he had before the injury, which enabled him to get more looks on the perimeter, because we know Vio was this slashing 6'4" shooting guard that could finish above and below the rim, but that slashing ability and quickness enabled him to get more open looks from 3, especially when defenders go under screens. In 2 of the 3 preseason games, he didn't look too good, but in the last one against the Sixers, he was really solid. He looked pretty confident as a shooter, and he shot a good percentage from 3 in that game, and he had some athletic finishes below the rim. And when he was getting to the rim, he showed some ability to change direction and change pace with his dribble that we've all been accustomed to seeing from Vio, and he operated pretty well in the pick and roll with Sabonis. Indiana had a very quiet offseason. Their only notable transaction or addition was Cassius Stanley being drafted in the 2nd round. They probably re-signed some role players, but I'm not really going to dive into that. When looking at this roster, it is pretty solid. It has a lot of talent and a lot of depth at the guard, forward, and center positions. So that gives me a lot of reason to believe that the Pacers could be successful in this upcoming season, with the Eastern Conference getting more talented. Coaching them is Nate Bjorkgren. I probably butchered that, but he was a long-time G League coach. In terms of NBA play, he's assistant coached the Suns from 15 to 17, and he was the Raptors assistant from 18 to 2020. Next season, I think the starting lineup will be Brogdon, Vio, TJ, Sabonis, and Turner, as probably everyone would expect, and I estimate them to go 500 next season. And I think that will be enough to get them the 8th seed in the Eastern Conference. I was really deciding between that 8th seed, or for that 8th seed between them and the Atlanta Hawks, and I ultimately ended up moving the Hawks to the 9th seed, because the Pacers are really talented. They were able to be the 6th best defense last year with Sabonis and TJ Warren in their starting lineup getting a lot of minutes, and without Oladipo because of his injuries. Now coming into this season, they have 4 guys that can go out and get a bucket off of their own creation. Sabonis, an all-star, TJ Warren, an extremely efficient scorer, Brogdon, who was an all-star consideration last year, whose efficiency wasn't the best last year, but his efficiency should improve this season with the addition of Oladipo. And then there's Victor Oladipo, who we know in the past has great scoring ability. So you can argue that simply because of Oladipo being at full health, the Indiana Pacers made a big improvement, and I think their success is going to be pretty dependent on how good he is this upcoming season. They still have Myles Turner as a rim protecting floor spacing center, and the bench remains virtually the same. They just have to wait and see for Jeremy Lamb to get healthy. I do think they'll get eliminated in the first round simply because teams like the Brooklyn Nets and Milwaukee Bucks are just much more talented than them. Direction though, they're competing. They're going to get an 8th seed. They have veterans in their prime right now, so they're going to be competing for a playoff seed. They're going to try and have some playoff success, and yeah, they're competing. They're trying to be as good as they can right now. They don't really have any young upcoming talent to build around. Sabonis and Myles Turner aren't very young anymore, the team's talented in the win now as well. So they're definitely going to be pretty successful next season in my opinion. And they're a smaller market team driven to make the playoffs every year, no matter how much talent they have, simply because, ticket sales. That's kind of what drives smaller market teams, getting that success, not really tanking because you want your crowd to really keep going to games. Well, I guess ticket sales isn't really a big factor anymore because of COVID, but you know what I mean. Indiana is basically the same team that clinched a 4th seed in the Eastern Conference, but they're bringing in a fully healthy, fully fresh Victor Oladipo, so they should have some of the best team chemistry in the East. The Pacers are talented. They have 4 guys in the starting lineup that can all get their own shot in Vio, Sabonis, Brogdon, and Warren. And excluding Warren, they are all at least above average playmakers. They posted the 6th best defensive rating last year, and with virtually the same roster, that shouldn't change much. So even with the Eastern Conference's bottom half improving, I still expect the Pacers to return to the playoffs. I project them to get the 8th seed, but given the small amount of roster turnover, I wouldn't be surprised if they exceeded my expectations.